Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a thriller show called The Passage. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The show is set in 2015, where two scientists, Dr. Jonas Lear and Dr. Tim Fanning, lead an expedition to remote Bolivian highlands. They are here to find a 250-year-old man who they believe can help in a breakthrough medical invention. The whole trip has been sponsored by the Department of Defense and the Center for Disease Control. Also on the trip are a Department of Defense representative, Clark Richards, a local guide, and a security team. After days of walking through the jungle, they arrive at a cave at the bottom of a gorge. They quickly enter it and see that the 250-year-old man is locked inside a cage. A young boy with a bucket of blood seems to be unlocking the door. The American team cannot make sense of what is happening, and Tim steps forward to question the boy, but the latter tells them to leave, yelling the word Jararaca, which means vampire in Spanish. At least it does when you pronounce it properly, which I did not. In the blink of an eye, all hell breaks loose as the vampire attacks Tim and goes straight for his neck. Clark finds a long wooden stake nearby and manages to drive it across the vampire's chest. However, the damage has already been done as Tim is bleeding profusely through his neck. The scene shifts to some time later, and we see Jonas praying in a clinic waiting room. He has lost all hope when suddenly something extraordinary happens. Tim walks out of the waiting room and looks completely healthy. He even exclaims that he feels amazing and that they have found what they're looking for, a great cure for all disease. You just gotta let someone bite your neck, man. It feels awesome. Jonas is elated to have his friend back, but he notices Tim's mouth is bleeding and his teeth also seem to be falling out. Through a narration, we get to know that this incident gave rise to Project Noah. It is a secretive, government-funded program where scientists experiment with Tim's blood serum. It contains a virus that could potentially cure all diseases, but could also wipe out the human race. Scientists use death row inmates as guinea pigs to test out various stages of their experiments. 3 years later, in 2018, two federal agents, Brad and Doyle, are sent to Huntsville State Prison on a special mission. They are here to convince a death row inmate, Anthony Carter, to join the research trials at Project Noah. Anthony has been arrested for the murder of his girlfriend, but the agents promise to get his sentence erased. Anthony initially has reservations, but since he is set to be executed, he accepts the offer. At the base of Project Noah in Colorado, Chief Scientist Dr. Major Nicole Sykes calls for a meeting. An outbreak of Chinese avian flu has mutated and become an epidemic. There's fear that it could become a global pandemic, with projections that it could reach the US in 3 months. The CDC now feels that their research is the best hope for a vaccine. However, Jonas points out that they're nowhere near close to having a vaccine ready. Another scientist jumps in and says that he has an idea, but it's slightly unorthodox. He then leads them down to the basement where the patients are kept. Following this, he summarizes the trial so far, and we get to know that Tim is patient 0. He was 52 at the time of exposure and underwent a brief period of rapid healing. It was followed by a decline into a nearly catatonic, blood-sucking monster who is, nonetheless, immune to diseases. After Tim, Project Noah began importing death row convicts to experiment on. They gave these test subjects his blood serum and made changes accordingly. Each patient stayed healthy for longer, but would eventually turn into a vampire. The most recent patient is Shauna Babcock, who is the best result they've had. It was 28 days before she began to decline, and she's retained her human looks. And she's looking good. Don't hit on the vampire, Daniel. From all of this, Daniel has figured out that it's not just the adjustments to the blood serum that make the difference. It's the age of the subject, because the serum attacks neurons, and younger people have more of them. Anthony Carter, their latest patient, is 25 and will arrive at the compound tomorrow, but what they really need is a child who would react to the formula with minimal side effects. Find me a child that's in prison for life. The scene shifts, and we are introduced to Amy Belafonte, whose mother passed away due to a drug overdose a few days ago. She has no immediate or even distant family, making her the perfect test subject. Back in Colorado, agents Brad and Doyle deliver the newest test subject, Anthony, to Project Noah's compound. They are then greeted by Clark, who embraces Brad warmly. It is revealed that they are old friends who served in special ops together. Clark Clark then hands Brad their next assignment, the folder with Amy Belafonte's information. A few hours later, the two agents arrive at Amy's foster home and have a conversation with her. Brad explains that the government thinks her mother died because she was exposed to a toxin. They are here to take Amy to a specialist in Colorado to see if she was exposed as well. However, Amy knows something shady is happening here and decides to run away. She packs up her stuff in a backpack, jumps out of a window, and then escapes. The agents notice this and start chasing her down the block. Doyle soon manages to corner her and tries to escort her away, but when Amy proceeds to fight, he has no choice but to slap her.
You bitch!
Once she is safely brought to their car, Brad drives until they're out of that neighborhood, but he abruptly stops the vehicle only a few moments later. Brad then grabs Doyle's neck and slams his face into the dashboard. He warns him not to hit Amy again, or he won't hesitate to pull a gun. Back in Project Noah, a sweeper named Lawrence has a small conversation with Jonas. He reveals that he and many other employees have had several realistic nightmares about Tim. Jonas, however, doesn't take these claims seriously and dismisses it as cabin fever, just like any good scientist would do. Later that night, Clark visits his girlfriend Nicole in her personal quarters. The duo chat for a while, then ends up getting intimate with each other. However, in the middle of making love, Clark begins to have a very realistic hallucination about Shauna Babcock. She accuses him of lying to her before revealing her hideous vampire face and sharp fangs. This is when Clark jolts back to reality and realizes that he was simply dreaming. In the meantime, the two agents from Project Noah are on their way back to the facility with Amy. They stop on the way for lunch when the kid notices there's a carnival nearby. She seems to be very eager to join, so Brad offers to take her there. Following this, the two have a lot of fun and it seems they're slowly forming a bond. Everything seems to be going well, when suddenly, Brad gets a call from his ex-wife Layla. We get to know that the duo had separated after their first child passed away in a tragic accident. Brad has never gotten over the grief, which explains why he cares so much about Amy, but it does not explain why the agency would choose him for this mission. After the phone call with his wife, Brad once more goes into a deep thought about his deceased daughter. He is fully aware that there is something shady and dangerous going on at Project Noah. Hence, he decides not to take Amy there to save her life. Brad then follows Doyle to the bathroom and launches a sneak attack, leaving his partner temporarily unconscious. Following this, he grabs Amy and tells her that there's been a change in plans. They steal a car from a nearby parking lot and head in a different direction. After a few hours of driving, Brad takes Amy to a lake so she can say goodbye to her mother properly. The kid, who has bottled her grief for the past several days, finally lets all the pain out. She even embraces the agent and cries in his arms. When the news of Brad's escape reaches Colorado, Clark is immediately sent to find him. Meanwhile, Anthony also starts having vivid hallucinations about Tim. The latter claims that things will get worse, but he will be there to help. Sometime later, Brad stops at a gas station where he sees his face all over the news. It turns out that he is now a wanted man on suspicion of kidnapping a 10-year-old kid. He quickly goes to a nearby payphone and contacts his ex-wife to tell her the truth, but he soon realizes that Clark is already there, questioning if she has heard from Brad. Fortunately, Layla pretends to receive a call from a patient and claims that she has got visitors. Brad understands the clue and confesses that he still loves her before hanging up. When he returns to the car, Brad notices a sheriff approaching and decides to turn himself in. He knows it'll be easier for Amy if her story becomes well known to the public. Brad thus surrenders, and he, along with Amy, are taken to the nearest police station. But this turns out to be a huge mistake, as Brad hears the cops being contacted by the Department of Defense. There is no way that the authorities will allow Amy to get to the public eye. Consequently, Brad comes up with a quick plan to escape the police station. He notices that the sheriff is currently busy with something else. Brad thus instructs Amy to sneak behind the counter and grab the handcuff keys. She obliges, and in a matter of a few seconds, Brad manages to free himself. Right at this moment, Clark and his men arrive at the police station. They are about to confront Brad, but he has already snatched a gun from the sheriff. A violent gunfight then ensues, killing 3 policemen, including the poor sheriff. Brad, who had previously served in the special ops, proves to be a tough son of a bitch. He kills a few men before going hand-to-hand against another. Shortly afterwards, Brad and Amy are on their way out, only to be confronted by Clark, but the latter hesitates to shoot his close friend as they share a close bond. Brad takes the opportunity and fires at a nearby fire extinguisher, forcing Clark to step back. He then grabs Amy, rushes outside and steals a police car to escape. Unfortunately, their escape comes at a price, as Amy soon notices that Brad has a gunshot wound. He seems to be holding up for now, but is also profusely bleeding from the abdomen region. After creating some separation from their pursuers, Brad abandons the police car and steals an old beat-up family wagon. He plans to head out to Arizona, but is forced to pull over after a few minutes. Brad is suffering from blood loss and soon passes out on the driver's seat. Elsewhere, Clark orders one of his agents to hack into Layla's phone. This proves to be crucial, as Amy soon uses a stolen phone to call her. Layla then guides the little girl on how to check on Brad's vitals. Once they confirm the bleeding is stopped, Amy pinches Brad's chest to wake him up and hands him the phone, but our hero quickly throws it away as he knows the agents can track the call. Back at Colorado, Jonas gives Anthony an injection with the blood serum and inserts a chip in his neck. In the meantime, Amy and Brad reach an old house at the end of a forest. The whole place looks normal until Brad deliberately pulls a tripwire that sets off an alarm. A woman named Lacey soon comes out with an assault rifle in her hands. She, however, puts it down as soon as she sees her old friend. It is revealed that Lacey was Brad's drill instructor in the Navy and had warned him against taking this job at Project Noah. Nonetheless, she accepts his request to give them shelter for a few days. They are completely unaware that Clark has already managed to track down this location. The following morning, several armed agents make it to the property. Brad and Lacey are having breakfast when they hear alarms go off all over the house. They immediately grab their weapons and open fire at the incoming agents, but Lacey gets hurt in the process, forcing Brad to surrender. He hopes that this will give Amy enough time to get away through the back door. However, Clark threatens to kill Brad, so the little girl decides to surrender as well. The duo is then loaded up in armored vehicles and taken away. On their way to Colorado, Clark remembers the time when he first met Shauna. He had found some of his men trying to take advantage of her. Clark beat them up and sent them away before calming Shauna down. The two of them chatted about their upbringing and soon became friends. Clark had also promised her the tests wouldn't hurt. Once they reach the facility, Amy and Brad are immediately separated. Nicole then visits the girl and explains that she can be the last hope for millions of people. This finally convinces Amy, but she also has a condition. Brad has to be with her at all times. Moments later, Clark brings Brad over and he's given a rundown of what is happening in the lab. Nicole then explains the serious issue of the avian flu and how it might kill up to 3 million innocent people. Upon hearing this, Brad eventually agrees to cooperate, so long as Amy is given the choice to accept or reject medical procedures. He then joins her in her room, but discovers the doctors have already put a tracker chip in her neck. Later that afternoon, Nicole visits the room and injects the serum into Amy. This allows Tim, who is kept in a special cell in the basement, to sense the girl's presence. Following this, both Amy and Brad take a nap, but he is soon woken up by Lawrence the sweeper. He tries to warn Brad that someone named Tim will come after the little kid, but their conversation is interrupted by two guards who quickly separate them. Later, Brad meets Anthony, who lives in the room right next to Amy's. The young man reveals that he too has vivid nightmares about a man named Tim. This finally piques Brad's interest, and he decides to investigate who this Tim is. One evening, Brad manages to sneak into the basement, a huge area that has been marked as 4B. He discovers the monstrous state of all the test subjects and feels bad because he brought them here from jail. Brad is looking at Tim's cell when Jonas suddenly arrives at the spot, but the scientist doesn't seem to be worried about Brad's presence. In fact, it seems like Jonas is happy that he is now getting a chance to talk to Brad. He explains that the monstrous appearance is a side effect of the serum, but they're doing this to save people. Brad then returns to his room loaded with new information and decides to take a nap. To his utter horror, he too has a very vivid nightmare about Taeum, who tells him to stay out of his way. A few days after this incident, dark and twisted things begin to happen at Project Noah. Jonas discovers that Tim's brain, which has been vegetative for years, is now showcasing extraordinary electromagnetic activity. On the other hand, when the nurses check on Anthony, they find him in the middle of a breakdown with a very high fever. He's immediately taken to the doctors, who decide he must be injected with a new serum formula. Simultaneously, one of Clark's most trusted soldiers named Paulson seems to have lost his mind. He has climbed to the roof of a nearby building with a sniper rifle. Paulson then shoots the electrical substation, leaving the entire facility without power. Now, Clark has to solve the problem quickly, as the doctors need the cooling machines to save Anthony. With time running out, Brad steps up and offers to talk to the rogue agent. it is revealed that he had previously worked as a hostage negotiator for the Special Ops team. In the meantime, Anthony goes into a sort of a coma where he keeps dreaming about his girlfriend. We get to know that Tam is behind these hallucinations, and he's deliberately trying to manipulate Anthony. He wants to build his own army of vampires by asserting control over all the test subjects in Project Noah. He is currently accelerating Anthony's mutation that will change him from a normal human being to a full-fledged vampire, just like him. Back outside, Brad reaches the roof and talks to Paulson. The latter confesses that he's already smuggled a vial of Tim's blood and hidden it. If the other agents kill him, they will never know where he has kept it. Brad tells him that he too wants to shut down Noah, mentioning the dreams and what he saw in 4B. Upon hearing this, Paulson is finally convinced and is about to reveal the full extent of what he knows. But right at this moment, Clark arrives and shoots him in the head. Shortly afterwards, the power is restored and the doctors rush to save Anthony, but it's too late. Tam has successfully invaded his subconscious mind. It turns out that Anthony hadn't actually killed his girlfriend. She had ended her own life, and he was framed for it since he is a young black male. Harnessing this frustration, Tim coerces Anthony to give in and allow the mutation to take over his body. The latter surrenders and soon wakes up as a vampire. Anthony immediately attacks a doctor and begins to drink his blood. A desperate Jonas tries to help, but Nicole drags him into another room. The episode ends as she discovers that Jonas has the infected blood on his face. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.